EDUcast. I'm delighted to spend some time with you today. I'm Deborah DeBoer, Director of Professional Development here at NSBAR. And my guests today are Rachell Runion, owner of TruHaven Homes of Highland Park, and Yvonne Dickerson, owner of Boutique Residential Realty in Evanston. Both my guests are joining me at the end of April, NAR's Fair Housing Month, to address what I call See It, Say It. We've been featuring events, podcasts, education, and other materials to mark the national, state, and local realtor associations' commitment to fair housing. Most of us are aware that the changes that have been made to the Code of Ethics this year, making it an ethics violation if a realtor engages in hate speech, harassment, epithets, or slurs in both their professional or personal life. When this occurs, an ethics violation can be made, and the Pro Standards Committee can and will address it. There are times, though, when what someone says may not rise to the level of a formal complaint, may not originate with a realtor, or may come from a client. The question becomes this: when you become aware of the situation, how do you handle it? What do you do? What do you say? It's easy to know what to do when someone makes a grossly obvious statement or takes a prohibited action against a protected class. Don't work with a client, for example, who would only want to show their home to a certain class of people or prohibit others from seeing the property. There are other times, though, when it is not quite as clear. A statement made at a dinner with a group of friends, a family event, a professional or education event. My guests are here today to clarify for me, when I see something, should I say something? And if I do, what is it I want to say? Thank you so much for joining me today. I think this is going to be a very illuminating discussion we have. So here's my first question. How often does this type of thing, this insensitivity, this people saying, I'm just going to call them, people saying stupid things, people just doing this, how often does something like that, someone being inappropriate or insensitive, how often does it happen in the world?
Well, I can say that the way we move around in our part of the world, we generally surround ourselves with people that are a little more like thinking or like-minded. So we don't necessarily bump into these people on a day-to-day basis. But if you're in the protected class, or if you're a minority, you are bumping into these situations consistently, constantly, every day. So there's a difference. To answer your question, for me, I'm not bumping into it every day. I bump into it occasionally. But when you're in the protected class or you're a minority, you're dealing with the very issues every day, multiple times a day, frequently. And that's why it becomes so stressful.
Okay. And I think that it also obviously depends on your age and your perspective. And I think what people don't realize, I happen to be the very fortunate mother of a 11-year-old giant son who is African-American. And I think that it's just something that happens to him every day. He's very, very used to it, sadly. And I think it's people don't think about what they're saying. They'll say things like, boy, you play ball? My son doesn't play sports. He doesn't like sports. When he's 8 years old, he came to me and said, Mom, why do people always ask me if I play ball? And I said, do you want the real answer? Because you're big and brown. And that's the real answer. And that's what his life is like. It's us and them. And so he has, and I've taught him, he has to be the bigger person and know and correct and stand in his truth. But I think it just depends on where you are in life and, who you're around. When we travel to other states, we live in the North and we've lived in Atlanta for 20 years. And those are safe places for the most part, I feel like, for us. But when we do things like visit friends in West Virginia, we get a very different response. So, I think it's a constant, but it hits you in different ways at different times.
You could move 20 miles from here and get a different response.
Yeah.
It's the reality. It's very important to understand that casual things are what one person may view as a casual statement or an unimportant statement becomes damaging and harmful or hurtful. And it's really important for people to take ownership for their own behavior. It's not important for us to, you and I are not the the people that should be pointing our fingers and correcting and fixing things. What we really have to do is guard ourselves and make sure that we're interacting correctly and properly, and that we're upholding our brand as a realtor and setting an example. Though it can be difficult at times. And there's times when some people's behavior are just inexcusable. And there are times when you have to speak up and say, this is not okay.
I also think that my answers used to be different than they are today for various reasons. There was a time that if you were somebody's grandfather and you used words that I didn't appreciate,
Right.
I would tell you in your own house, that's your business, don't do to mine. But,
Right.
and I would make rules like that. My opinion is no longer that. And it may be my age, it may be the things that have gone on, and maybe I'm just sick of it and we just need some progress. So I think these days I think that most people just don't realize, my hope is that a lot of people just don't realize how they're affecting other people. And that if maybe you just tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, that was, and they might go, oh God, foot and mouth, you're right. Wow. All right. And move on and let it be just a learning moment where they can go, oh God, I've never thought about it that way. And I've had that experience a lot. I have 3 children, all from different races. My baby is Mexican American. My middle daughter is Middle Eastern American. And my son, as I mentioned, is African American. And it's very interesting to the reactions to people or people's reactions to that blend. But what I have learned is that unfortunately my son does get the brunt of that because he doesn't pass, I guess. And it is hurtful. And what I really have come to terms with is what the people that say these things, what they don't understand is that my son is seen as a group and not an individual. And that is the thing that I don't think that most people understand. And I think that most people, if you talk to them and they do understand, then they stop. And that's the wonderful thing. And if we just stay quiet and we don't do anything and we just, wait for that generation to die off or whatever, it's not necessary. I think people can change and people can evolve.
Well, and what I hear you saying is there's some intent has something to do with this, because some of the intent, I'll give you a perfect example. I had a lovely woman in a different class. She's lovely. And she said, I don't see color. And I said, I'm going to stop you here for a minute and say, everybody sees color. I'm in this camera, I'm pinker than Yvonne is. Everybody sees color. So to say to someone, I don't see color, kind of says, I don't see you. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes to the part of what you're talking about is we need to see people, in all their glory, maybe.
I think when someone says they don't see color, they might also mean that they're working on themselves to not make color what they see first.
Yes.
I actually really agree with that. And I also think that some of this is, even though not intentional directly, it's very deep-seated and very old and very long and very our responsibility to fix.
Right.
And that's
it can't go on.
We're the only ones that can fix it. That's it.
I think it's really important for us as realtors to, we have a standard that we follow because we choose to, which is of course our code of ethics. But we also live that in our personal lives. It's ingrained in us, period. That's just who we are. It's really important for us to stand up and say when something's not right, because if we say nothing, we become enablers. And what we're really trying to do is put an end to bad behavior. We won't, because it's human nature. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look back at history, it's just human nature. But we all have that choice of whether we would become divisive, if we would become, or if we choose to be kinder, nicer, better, more open people. So I don't want to leave the door open and become an enabler as a realtor for people and their bad behavior. How you handle that, I don't know, but we just keep trying.
And that's one of the interesting things. Matt DeFanis, who has spearheaded has spearheaded very much of the change that came into the Code of Ethics this last year. And he is just one of the loveliest human beings on earth. And one of the things he said in one of the podcasts he was doing is, you can't say to someone, I see that what you're saying is racist and you must be a racist. Because at that point, he said, all dialogue dies.
Right.
Everything dies at that point. There's nowhere to go from there. And I think in some cases that may be the appropriate answer, honestly and truly, and go away from me. But I think,
And I think when it comes to clients too, there's a difference also because we're professionals and we are realtors. There's a difference on are we talking about a client? Are we talking about a customer? Are we talking about a colleague? Are we talking about a fellow realtor?
Right.
And, to me, the easiest one is client, because I can terminate any client I want. I don't have to work for anyone. And I hold that very near and dear to my heart. It's one of the wonderful things about my job. I'm not forced to work with someone that I won't work with. I have rarely been put in that position, but I also am a residential property manager. I take fair housing very seriously because I think that it is at its core good and necessary, unfortunately. But I have had, for example, I don't allow my owners to have a choice on what tenants move in. I screen tenants, I pick them, I lease them, they get a document that I have signed on their behalf with their permission. And I have had, situations where I've had an owner say, well, I want to know the tenant's last name before you sign the lease. That happened to me probably 12 years ago. And not only did I not sign the lease, but I fired the owner. And, some people were like, well, that sort of seemed like jumping. I'm like, it's not a jump. There's no reason. There is no reason. If they passed my screening, there's no reason to know what their name is. I mean, it's literally doesn't affect anything unless he is having some sort of inappropriate, thoughts, I guess. And so for me, the clients, that's the easy one.
Right.
Friends wouldn't happen for me because, like you said, we kind of tend to hang out with people that are similar to us. Maybe a friend's parent. Now, I did have a conversation, last year when everything's going on. I saw a bunch of friends in Atlanta, and we were at the group was all Caucasian women, and they were saying, what do we do? How can we help? How can we help? And interestingly enough, one of the women said, she's like, I would never, talking about her daughters and who they choose to marry, be it gender identity, race, all of the things now that come into play when you have an 11-year-old. And she said, none of that affects me. But however, if my daughter were to date a man of a certain ethnicity, I would not be able to tell my parents. And she's, my age, a successful woman. I'm like, maybe that's what we can do. Maybe you owe it to your daughter and to your daughter's friend to tell your parents. And I think it's sort of standing in I think it's about seeing the moment as it happens, right, no matter what that moment is, and just saying, you know what, no, I am going to say something. And in my experience, mostly people they want to evolve. They want to understand. They want to grow.
I think so. Using the word racist it's kind of pointless, because when I see someone behaving badly, racist is the first word that comes into my mind. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything.
Oh, let me guess what that word might be. Yes. Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything to me. I wouldn't be walking around calling.
It's been so overused. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a lot of, I don't even,
value.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too.
It's almost like a badge of honor. If someone has ill intent and you call them a racist, all of a sudden you've just endorsed them.
Right.
So it's not important. What is important, though, as you said, is in personal personal relationships and extended relationships within families. As things come up, it's easy to be able to just gently talk about things. You're not trying to convince anyone of anything. What you're really trying to do is simply say, let's all treat each other with respect, basically.
Yeah. Well, and it's, that's what we teach our children, and our, that's, I think that, again, I think people, it has been my experience, and maybe I'm just very, very fortunate, but it has been my experience that people are generally surprised that these things that they have said or did hurt someone, or potentially could hurt someone, and they don't want that. I don't think people just walk around wanting to hurt people. But I also think that it's not an excuse. We all have a responsibility to educate ourselves and to be ethical, good people. And so it is a slippery slope, because I will not give anyone a card. There's no excuse. Just own it and go, oh my gosh, I need to look into why I would say such a thing, and work on me,
And ask questions.
Yeah.
If it's really unclear, and if you need a little clarity, ask me. I will be more than happy to explain. What I do want to say, though, is that we are a mixed race family, and I married my husband in late 1960s. And where we are today and where we were then is light years apart. People would do terrible things to you just because they could. And it took a great deal of time and patience to work to this point. So at this point, I have patience because I have seen things evolve so nicely until the last few years. And this may be controversial to say, but, and I know that as you walk down the street, or you move around in a mall, or wherever you go and you're with your children, you have an extra sense about you of who you need to pay attention to, or just one moment, let's step over here, or whatever. There's another sense that comes into play, and we know about people before they even open their mouths. We know. And it's very easy. It's very easy for us to read it. Over the last few years, those people have been very verbal, very abusive, and very difficult. So now what you and I knew, and we couldn't explain to anybody else, everybody else is now getting to see. So we don't have to. It's very easy for me now to know who's the problem in the room, because they just told me. So things have changed a little bit.
Yeah.
The only good of that is that the average person who maybe you were having a conversation with before, where you were saying, perhaps we could be more gentle in our conversation or whatever, now those very same people are seeing the abusive, just devastating comments and remarks or behavior. And so now there are many, many, many more people who are saying, okay, I think I get it. And that's a good thing. In the worst of ways, it is a good thing.
Right. No,
So
I agree.
I think raising 3 young children right now, you're doing a lot of talking and a lot of explaining.
A lot. And it is, even myself, even just if I had not taken the paths that I have taken in adulthood, I don't know that I would know as much. People just don't. I'll give you an example. My son was 7 and we lived in a neighborhood, a very diverse neighborhood, middle-class neighborhood. And it's kind of 70s style. The kids would kind of like run around on their bikes till street lights came on. It was great. It was awesome. I loved it. All the parents, we all know each other. We all get together on the weekends. It's very close-knit community. And I got a call from my friend, my good friend, down 4 doors down, her husband. And he said, I wanted to talk to you about something. It's not me. It's some of the dads have mentioned. And I wanted you to know, because I don't want there to be talk, and I want to make sure you're aware. some of the dads have mentioned they're uncomfortable with AJ walking around the neighborhood with his Nerf guns. He was 7 and the kids would run around in big packs, you know, and my son is also some special needs. So he's not always socially appropriate. He's a little awkward. And so he would run around with these packs of kids. And then I wanted to force him to go to kids' houses, knock on the door, say hello, can you come out and play? Things kids don't do anymore, which I believe wholly in. And so if there weren't just kids in the pack, I'd say, go knock on this kid's door, go knock on that kid's door, let's go see who. So he would get his Nerf guns and walk the neighborhood by himself. And this was brought to my attention that it maybe somebody might perceive it as poor behavior. He was a 7-year-old with Nerf guns. And by the way, Nerf guns were the only guns he was allowed to have for multiple reasons. You know, I couldn't buy my kid the same toys that the other kids had, and I couldn't buy him the same clothes that the other kids wore. And I would have never thought that these things would be true, but they're true. Right. They really, really are true. And so I guess, you know, going back to the whole realtor thing, I think that I very much believe in leading by example. And I very much believe in, you know, they go low, you go high. And that is, you know, as I call it, raising the bar has been something I believed in my whole life. So when it comes to business and as a realtor, when it comes to my personal life, because the ethics code, it encompasses both, actually. The ethics code does not just encompass your work life, it encompasses your whole life. And so I think it's an uncomfortable time, but it's a really good time because everybody wants to avoid uncomfortable conversations, but I'll tell you, as a mother of a now almost 12-year-old, I have to have uncomfortable conversations with him almost every day. So having uncomfortable conversations with a grown-up, that should be a no-brainer. Let's do that. Let's do that. That would be great. So we don't have to have them with the 7-year-old. And, you know, I think that it is uncomfortable, but and it's one of the things it's why I'm a realtor, and why I choose to spend that extra money and do that is because I think that it matters, and that code hopefully will allow us and enable us to continue to grow and be the example.
Right. The code of ethics for us is it's the standard. It isn't the limit.
Right.
It's the minimum standard. And I don't think people in our profession, not all, I shouldn't say that. So I think there are many people in our profession who feel that it's just, it's a piece of paper or it's a document, and they don't really have to. Once they said their license is renewed and everything's fine, they go on about their business, and that's that. And they never think about it. They don't live it. They don't breathe it. And then when they behave badly and it comes back to them, it's like, oh, it was a mistake, or it was a misstep, or whatever. But it isn't. It's critically important that we uphold our minimum standard and strive for even better, because there's so much more work that needs to be done. And I'm so grateful for you. I agree with you 100% on everything you've said. It isn't easy.
I was going to say, you've been at it a lot longer than I have, but it
is not easy when they grow up, because now I have adult children in the family, and they are starting to have children, and they're looking at the world and saying, what did you do? What did you make better? And it's very hurtful, because we did, but it's their job now to. Well,
and on a similar note but different topic, because I also I'm gay, so I came out when I was 20, and living in Arlington Heights, and at the time, I mean, when you were saying that was very reminiscent with me on that platform, because I remember my first girlfriend, I got kicked out of her first apartment because the landlord told us, and this was a landlord office, like an apartment building, said two women should not be in a 1-bedroom apartment, and they kicked us out. We had no notice, no nothing. So that has also, we've made great strides to that degree as well. And I think that But I also think that when you're dealing with LGBTQ, and there are letters after that, but I'm old and I don't remember them all.
Put the plus on then.
There are bunches of them, and I love it. I think that, you know, we have made a lot faster progress, certainly. It's not super quick, but there's been a lot of progress in the last, you know, 15, 18 years. But you also have to remember that that progress came so quickly because in general, our community has no children and more money. That's why that happened so quickly. And I think it's important to know that. And it should have happened. And it should have happened a long time ago. And it should have had nothing to do with that. But we had resources as a community. And I think that the communities that do not have those resources, that's where the fall down is. And those are the communities that, you know, if nothing else, you should not beat down. You should not, you know, bring down. They have enough problems. They don't need, they don't need that.
I think the biggest thing a child can have is their self-esteem. And as our society, people in our society are cavalier about what they say and what they do, they don't realize the damage they're doing to the self-esteem of young children. If a child overhears this child, regardless of who they are, is going to have a takeaway. And if you hear it often enough, if you see it often enough, the self-esteem of that child is basically destroyed. And the things that they should be able to do or achieve is compromised, because in the back of their head, they're hearing a voice that they're not good enough, they're
You're
bad,
you're dirty. Yep.
yeah, you're dangerous. It's a whole list of things. And so the very simple thing that someone could say could become just piling on more and more and more baggage.
Well, when it's a common occurrence in your life, I mean, that's what they hear.
I'm going to interrupt a little bit and say, even when it's not a common occurrence in your life, and I'm going to give you a dorky example. My 45-year-old
I haven't heard anybody say dorky in a long time.
Yeah, well, there you go. My 45-year-old daughter, who does not do sports, said to me a few weeks ago, well, you know, Mom, the reason I don't do sports is because, and she named the little boy, she said, this little boy in 3rd grade said I was clumsy and couldn't do any sports. And that was the last day I ever tried.
Well, I think it's time to get out there and see what you enjoy.
Well, and we've had that discussion, but it was such a critical reminder to me.
Right.
That the least little thing can have such a breathtaking
effect. These fragile little minds.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And it's our responsibility to nurture those minds, not destroy them.
I think. Ladies,
well, one of the things that I've always as I became more and more trying to teach my daughter and my nephews, one of the things that I thought was very helpful is if you take a statement and you turn what is supposed to be a harmless statement, turn a harmless statement around. The statement says XYZ, flip it around, and now what the statement implied, turn it around. And so in the example I gave you, where I said he didn't look like a bad guy, he was white, what is implied is that if you turn it around, everyone who isn't white is a bad guy. I mean, so try it on. If you make a statement, anyone make a statement, ask yourself if you can flip that statement around, and how does that statement feel? If it doesn't feel right to you because it got flipped, then it's not going to feel right to the person you just said it to.
Well, I think also people need to realize that I find sometimes that when people speak, they speak to the audience that they have.
Correct.
And people will make the mistake of thinking that because everyone in a room looks like them, that they
get that all the time. I finally announced myself in one of the board meetings of the board classes as the undercover white person. You know, like, come on now, please, you know,
Yeah, we make the joke
kind-
since I'm
kind of
Jewish, gay, and
Yes.
adoptive parent of biracial children. I make the joke that I'm like the secret shopper. So, you know, but it really is true. And people, their comfort level, and that's, you know,
right.
probably I may see it more than a lot of other people see it. But that's not okay, you know, and maybe it's a good thing. I made a choice. I was on a podcast for Day House last year, and about the topic of fostering and African-American children in Atlanta and white privilege. And I made the choice when I did that. I was very nervous. I was very nervous about doing it. And after I did it, I realized that, you know, we all have a special cape. We all have a thing that we can do to help. And I decided on that day that never again, if I hear it, I'm going to say something. If I see it, I'm going to say something. I'm going to do something. And I think that, and it really was like a moment for me. And I have been raising African-American children for 15 years, and it has never occurred to me. My job was to protect them.
Right.
That's how I looked at it. But what I realize now is part of protecting them is educating, period. And so that has been my, that's what I did. And so I hope everybody will. I hope everybody will look. And I think that everyone, no matter who you are, where you come from, we all have a bias against someone, something, and I'm in no way saying that doesn't exist. However, I think that it really, enough is enough on some things, and we need to really sit and look at our own, look at ourselves and make some kind of statement about who we are and what we believe in. And I am so glad, you know, to be part of an organization that supports that.
Absolutely. And in terms of bias, you're right. We have bias over the smallest, most insignificant things or the most critically important things. But once you become aware.
I don't like Volvos. Never have. Don't like them. I can't stand them. Every time I see a Volvo, I'm like, who's driving that Volvo? Who drives a Volvo? Anyway.
But when you get to,
and honestly, some of it is as crazy as that.
Makes no sense. I don't know why.
Sense.
My grandmother worked for a Volvo dealership when I was a kid. Maybe they were mean to her. I don't know, but I don't like Volvos. And so, to be human is to err, and to be human is to have those sorts of thoughts. However, to be human is also to be able to live in your moment and evolve. And
well, that's the point, to evolve and get to the point where you can decode yourself and understand when a bias is coming.
Why?
Where you can decode yourself and say, whoa, wow, I'm very biased on that. It could be the least important or the most important thing, but it's a process and it's part of personal growth.
Yeah, ladies, I want to thank both of you for being here. There are some things as you spoke that I think were really important. One of them is see it, say it. But none of you said see it or say it mad. You said see it or say it as a way to help someone understand. And that's what you were talking about. Yvonne, you're talking about your history because I lived through, you know, I was young in the 60s, but not that young in the 60s. So when you talked about that history, I lived through some of that history and watched some of those horrible things happen. And you're right, we have grown some.
Right.
But we have plenty of ways to grow.
Long way.
Further.
I'll never forget, my mother told me, as I was leaving home to be on my own, she said, look, you can marry anyone you want, just not a Black man. And I was like, well, that's an odd thing to say to somebody. And then, damn, if it didn't happen.
And then that teenager went.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh, wow, this isn't going to be good.
Yvonne, you're a woman after my own heart.
I have to tell you, thank you both for being with us today. I've enjoyed this very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I want to thank my guest today for spending time with NSBAR, discussing the ways to address difficult situations effectively. It was a pleasure to spend time with them. This is the last week in April. If you haven't already completed your Managing Broker CE, you have one last opportunity. Go to NSBAR.org, education, calendar, online to complete the classes you need in the next few minutes. If you completed your CE but have not renewed your license, do it today at IDFPR NSBAR/license renewal. I also need to remind you that December 31st, 2021 is the end of the National Association of Realtors triennial requirement to complete a code of ethics class. Many of you have already done so. If you have not, you will find monthly opportunities to do that on the NSBAR education calendar. I also wanted to remind you that opening day for broker renewal is May 1st. Those of you who are early birds are welcome to start your requirements early and get them completed soon. Thank you.